Welcome everyone to the Teenage Brain, hosted by myself, Ali, and Cameron. And just to start, let's go through this.
Sure thing. In the spirit of reconciliation, Youth Opportunities acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today.
Thank you, Cameron. Great, a little bit about us before we head into everything. So we are all here on behalf of Youth Opportunities. We'll talk a little bit about what we do in a moment. But I guess I'll go first. I seem to be the one on the screen on the left there. So my name is Nina. I work in program development, and I work for the research and development arm of our program. I've been training the program as well for definitely over 5 years, but I think it's that we're 6 now. On to you.
G'day, I'm Cameron. I completed Youth Opportunities in Year 10, and I have just very recently completed the Youth Prosper Leadership Program this year, which was also my final year of Year 12. I'm just an average teenager, and my dreams are to become a sushi chef and hopefully move to Japan one day.
Awesome, thanks Cam. So I'm Ali Prescott, I'm the Project 360 officer here and also a trainer and coordinator. I've been training the program now for almost 3 years and lots of experience working with children, young people and families in the past, back in the UK where I'm originally from, and I'm also a parent of 3, so I know how difficult it could be.
Yes, a lot of what we're talking about this evening is about parenting. I know not everyone is a parent that is attending today. Some of you might be teachers or mentors or just work with youth, but you're all here to support youth. If we use this terminology interchangeably, we absolutely mean everyone.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess before we get into it, some of you may or may not have been on a webinar before. So we're all used to Zoom meetings in this COVID age, but maybe not webinars so much. So one function that we do encourage you to use throughout the webinar to interact with us and each other as well is the chat bar function. So you should be able to see a chat bar function there, and feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar as they come up for you, and we'll try to get them to them as soon as possible. If we don't, we'll answer them at the end. We'll definitely take some time at the end there. So let's have a quick practice. Let's see if you can all find the chat bar, and we'd love to know where you are joining us from today. So just open up the chat bar and just pop in where you're coming from today, because we've got, like we said, people from interstate, people from South Australia. I'm not sure if we've got any international people here, and maybe just what your role is. So are you a teacher, a mentor, a parent? Are you somebody who's just a supporter of youth opportunities who wants to know more about what we do? Brilliant.
Everyone's getting the hang of it very quickly.
Yes, and I see a few names there from the last webinar, so hello to everybody who was at our parent-only webinar a few weeks ago.
Oh, there's one tricky thing about the chat bar in terms of the webinars is it would be great if people could tick the little drop-down menu to show to everyone, not just hosts and panelists. What that means is Ali, Cameron, and myself are the panelists. So if you could do it to everyone, and then we can kind of share some information. I know sometimes these webinars get a little lonely on our side. We can't see all of our lovely attendees, but we do like to hear from you. So hopefully you can keep that open and keep that going throughout the session.
Awesome. So I see lots of people there from Adelaide, Mount Gambier, lots of mums, parents, and Paralawi. Oh, Keisha, you were here last time. Thank you for coming back. All right. Well done. Let's use that chat bar function, and definitely when we talk about some of our shared experiences, it's really nice to know that other people have either similar views, or we could learn from people as well. So really encourage you to use that. Okay, so For those who don't know much about youth opportunities, or you maybe want to know a little bit more, you can see up here our vision and our mission. So I'll let you read those in your own time, but what I'd like to tell you a little bit about is how do we try to achieve these things. So one is through our 10-week personal leadership program. So this is delivered across schools across SA, and we see significant improvements in resilience, well-being, confidence, and relationships. We also see aspirations and motivation for school increased and feelings of anxiousness decreased. So after the program ends and the young people have graduated with 20 SACE points from our face-to-face program, we offer graduate engagement through Project Prosper. So this project provides development workshops co-designed by our young people for 2 years after graduation. And some graduates, like Cameron, then choose to continue their leadership even further by becoming Prosper leaders. We also have a scholarship program which allows graduates to apply for funds to continue with their goals after graduation, where there's a financial barrier. So that could be anything like laptops, cameras, driving lessons, and things like that. So Project 360 is another way that we try to achieve our mission, and that's what you're experiencing today. This is our wraparound service where we educate, empower, and inspire the community around the young people to connect, understand, and empower their own young people. So traditionally, this has only been available for parents and teachers of those going through the program, but more recently, we've actually made the decision to share our knowledge far and wide in order to make a bigger impact for our future generation. So we really hope that those joining today who aren't parents of people on the program really get, what you need from this webinar today.
All right, time for a question. As a teenager, I know personally one of the biggest challenges I have with communicating with the adults around me is that it's communication. It's just getting conversation between each other. Sometimes it just doesn't work. So what is the most common difficulty in your relationship with the young people in your life?
Just remember to pop it onto everyone there so that we can share experiences.
So what we'll do is we'll be monitoring the chat bar for your responses and hopefully incorporate some of your concerns into our presentation today. So today is about the adolescent brain and some of those challenges that come with that. Hopefully in the presentation, we've got a framework that can help you understand how to mitigate those items. And so we'll just hopefully weave that in as we go along. So thanks so far for people's responses. We have getting them motivated, changes in mood, asking for help with the situation and not liking the suggestion. I think we'll cover that too. So thank you for that. Please keep them coming. In the meantime, I'm just going to continue on with a couple of some psychological underpinnings of our program, because I think that will help people understand why we use particular tools when it comes to mitigating challenges in the teenage brain. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the first one. The first one is called Locus of Control. So this could be referred to something like agency or self-determination. This is basically the degree to which people believe that they have control over the outcome of events in their lives, as opposed to external forces beyond their control. So you can see on the screen there's someone with an internal locus of control. They might have thoughts or attitudes like, I determine my future and I'll find a way, versus someone with an external locus of control kind of blames things on bad luck or that it's not about them. So this is a tricky one. We try and influence this in a positive way in the young people in our lives, because if we can have a more internal locus of control, then of course we're going to believe that we have influence over our future. We're going to make more effort to make that happen. There's a lot of evidence as well around having a more internal locus of control, linking to better academic achievement, a better predictor of grades and high scores on these things, but it also goes into job success and higher achievement in work and career. And it's a really tricky one because we live in such a world where we don't feel in control. So I don't want to focus too much on the idea of control. It's not about that at all. It's about saying to yourself, well, where in my life do I have influence over and where do I not? And accepting the difference between the two. I know sometimes it's can be in our environment, we have this idea of being in control of everything. That's not the case at all. But sometimes it's about changing your perspective or thinking about where you can have influence in your life. So in the program, we actually call this personal leadership. And that's, as you know, it's our personal leadership program that you see across the board. So this runs throughout all of the tools that we cover. It's about the difference between personal responsibility for the outcomes and not blaming others for them.
So when you talk, sorry, Nina, I was gonna say, when you talk about that, it's when you think about teenagers, it's like, oh, it wasn't my fault. It was because the teacher didn't explain it properly and things like that.
Great example, Ali. So a lot of what we try to do in the program is really question some of that thought process and say, well, where can you take personal leadership of that? Even though there are other influences like that teacher's not making it easy for you, how else might you get around that problem? So maybe it's directly asking for help, finding information in a different way, all of these things.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to bring up this idea because as parents and mentors and teachers, it's about helping facilitate that with young people. So as parents particularly, thinking about what you can do to help young people develop an internal locus of control. Well, it's again about that cause and effect. So as you're negotiating things around the house, just being really clear about your expectations and following through. So for example, if you have an arrangement with your child or young person, then stick to that arrangement. Don't try and add in a different consequence or something like that. So what you're trying to do is teach them personal leadership. If they do it and they fulfill their end of the bargain, you're going to follow on that as well. You're not going to try something else as well. The next one is about reminding young people of when they did have kind of control over the outcomes in their life. So yeah, reminding them, oh, remember that time that you had that falling out with that friend and you really actually made the effort to go and make that work. So remind them of those positive qualities and what they've done well in the past. The next one is about not rescuing or making excuses. I know this is a really easy thing to do because we want to protect young people, and especially if they're going through a bit of a hard time. We want to make life easy for them, but sometimes if we continually do this, it really sets up a not so great precedent with them following through. A big one is just about attending school or kind of calling in sick for them, even though that might not be the case all the time. And again, like we all do this to some extent, but it's about making sure that it's not kind of an ongoing problem as well. Lastly, last couple are about asking questions to get a young person to think through their actions. We'll touch base on this as well when we talk about the teenage brain. And lastly, it's about role modeling great behaviors as well.
Which is always easier said than done, but it's possible.
And then, of course, I wanted to make mention of neuroplasticity, which is the second of our kind of general psychological underpinnings of the program. This is the ability for the brain to rewire itself. And hey, your brain might even be changing in the next hour if you're learning all this new information. So it happens constantly. It happens in the program as well.
So in youth opportunities, these are the 4 big decisions that we work on. There's decide to be happy, decide to goal plan, decide to use STAR communication, and decide to grow. My role today is to talk to you about the tools I learned on the program and the strategies I use to help me overcome the challenges that come with having a teenage brain.
So while most of you already know about our 4 big decisions, I just will put up on the screen there that psychological research behind each of them, so that you know that as we're going into them, what's going on in the background there. I also wanted to clarify a couple of the decisions there. We'll talk about what sending stars is like. Well, actually, Cameron, do you want to define what that is for anyone who's new?
So sending stars is the action of giving out a compliment or something positive to somebody else, because not only does it make them feel better, but it makes you feel better about yourself and hopefully that leads to you and the other person sending more stars to other people and gradually just growing through your environment a much more positive communication.
Thank you. We'll talk about goal planning, and we'll talk about decide to grow, which is basically just stepping out of your comfort zone, trying new things and getting opportunities. And then there's decide to be happy, which I do want to clarify a little bit, because I know sometimes when people see these words, decide to be happy, oh, it just sounds so ethereal, doesn't it? Like, oh, just make the choice, everything will be fine. In the program, we do talk about some of those short-term things that might make us feel happy in the moment. So these are things like looking for the positives, random acts of kindness and gratitude. And while there's some great research that talks about these moments of positivity, you know, building up and resulting in greater well-being, the idea of deciding to be happy goes much deeper than that. And it's actually more about a long-term decision. So it's about if you're going through a bit of a hard time, or you want to be happy in the future, it's about what decisions can you make right now that will lead to long-term happiness. And oftentimes those are kind of hard decisions that actually might not make us feel good in the moment. You know, maybe it's about putting down the video games and working on schoolwork instead. That is deciding to be happy, even though it might not seem like it in the moment. So we do a bit of exploring of that in the program. So I'm just wanting people to keep that in mind as we continue on. I would guarantee everyone that's, you know, in this room would have made some sort of choice in their life about a hard thing they had to do that was going to lead them to a longer term happiness as well.
Definitely.
Great. So let's get into the adolescent brain. So we used to think that the brain was fully developed by the time puberty hit. And commonly we actually attribute the emotions of a young person to puberty and hormones. That often gets a bit of a bad rap. But it turns out this isn't so much the case, but it's more about actual brain changes. So new technologies like MRI and fMRI now tell us that changes in both structure and function are happening in the adolescent years. And it's, you know, adolescent is up until the age of 25 or maybe even up to 30 for some people. So it's very relevant for all the young people that we might be working with. And these brain changes are driving some of the behavior changes that you see. And you'll even see probably some things you've definitely heard about before. And they get a bit of a reputation as well. So what we'll do is we'll go through some of those changes and then we'll talk about strategies as well. So in the adolescent brain, we've got one thing going on, which is synaptic pruning. Some of you might have heard about this one. So this is the idea that, you know, our connections in our brain are all interlinked. So when we're born and in very early childhood, our brain makes all the possible connections there can be. So we don't know what this world is going to be like. You know, a young child at 6 years old, between 3 and 6, have more connections in their brain than like the pediatrician that they're going to see. So it's actually quite a lot. Then what happens in adolescence is that this pruning happens. So for the connections that aren't needed and that aren't used, they actually die away. And the pathways that are used and they're important, they stay along. And so that's actually why we run this program with young people. It's kind of this golden opportunity to set up some really good habits in their lives while that synaptic pruning is happening. We want to keep that good stuff. And the other main change here we've got is the changes in some neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters help with information processing in the brain. So it's about assisting those connections in the brain as well. There's lots of changes in neurotransmitters in adolescence, but we're going to focus on 3 throughout this presentation. So you'll actually hear me kind of go between the brain physical changes and then those 3 neurotransmitters as well. So I think it's really helpful as a parent or a mentor to know what kind of changes are happening in the brain chemistry as well. All right, we've got our brain demonstration here. So most change in a young person's brain is the prefrontal cortex. So this is kind of the brain's CEO or chief executive, as you might like to think of it. It's actually where all that pruning is happening. So that's why it's maybe more difficult to be used. It's more difficult to make decisions. One of the key functions is rational decision making. And it's actually the last part of the brain to mature. So not only is that synaptic pruning, but it's the last to mature, because what happens is our brain matures or develops from back to front and from inside to out. So you've got the prefrontal cortex right at the front there. And then you've got your limbic system, which is kind of deep inside, a little bit more towards the back. And this is the brain's more emotional hub. It matures first. It's kind of known as like our reptilian brain and these kind of things. So it kind of becomes this default state. And that's why we see some very emotional rather than logical responses from young people. So it's good to be aware. So the strategy is here, don't take any emotions personally, and to also pick your time to communicate to young people. Not when emotions are high. You may have to set things aside and make sure everyone's calmed down and thinking a bit rationally when you bring things up there as well.
Some of you may have heard of Dan Siegel's flipping the lid. So he does a demonstration where this is the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and in here is the limbic system, and the amygdala. And literally, if it flips, that lid flips, there's no point in talking to a person when they're in that state, because they cannot make logical choices. We have to wait till these two parts of the brain reconnect again. So this is very similar to that, and a great resource if you wanted to Google Dan Siegel's brain.
Great. Now, in addition to our brain, the young person's brain being hot-wired for emotion, we have one change in the neurotransmitter serotonin. Most of you have heard of this one as well. It makes us feel calm and relaxed. It impacts mood and anxiety. And actually, during adolescence, there's a drop in serotonin, and particularly with girls, because it's linked to estrogen. Now, I know I mentioned that hormones don't play a big role, but in this case, there is a bit of a link to estrogen here. So yes, low serotonin is linked with anxiety, loneliness, depression, and self-harming behaviors. And you might have even heard of it because it's in those antidepressants like Prozac and the like as well. So this is a bit of a tricky one, because I think as parents and mentors, it's really hard to know when it's a normal low in young people versus kind of getting that extra help. Empathy and listening go a really long way to help get the young person through any difficult times, but you may need to encourage a visit to a specialist help or something like that if it's needed. So I just thought I would ask Cameron, because you are here, do you have any advice for parents and mentors? How do we understand the difference?
So definitely for people our age in this modern generation, we seem to spend a lot of time by ourselves in these years. And media, video games, phones, all those sorts of things are a really good distraction, but they can be educational, and it's different for everybody. I really love spending time by myself. So just because I'm alone in my room, maybe even in the dark, doesn't mean I'm necessarily having a bad time, because I thoroughly enjoy just going on my phone and watching YouTube. I know a couple adults who have very young children and teenagers. They like their downtime too. So it's very much the same for all of us. The key point is to just make sure you know the young people around you, so you can kind of point out when the difference and the abnormal amounts of alone time start.
Right, I think that's important. I was just looking to see in the chat bar, I thought someone mentioned earlier about changes in mood. So I just wanted to make sure that we were addressing that. Thank you, Cameron.
No worries.
Okay, so something that we focus on in the program is building up our self-image, or the young people's self-image, through the process of identifying and practicing their strengths. So this list here, as you can see, is a list of like strengths or good qualities. And a lot of the young people that we work with at this age, they really, really struggle to identify any strengths. You know, the amount of interviews that we've had, because we have one-to-one time with the students on the program, and we talk to them about, well, you know, what are the good things about you? What would your friends say? Well, I don't know. I really can't see any strengths, or, you know, maybe one, I'm a good friend. So, you know, we really in this tool try to help them to identify what their strengths are, what their qualities are. And if they do struggle, we ask them to just start with one or two, because we know that the more aware of your strengths you are, the less impact and fear of judgment can affect your level of happiness. Because if you're somebody who really struggles to see your own strengths, then you may think that other people can't see any good things about you either. And that affects not only your level of happiness, but also your relationships. So it's super important that they are able to identify them and work on them, practice them every day, so that you actually start to believe that, yeah, that is definitely a strength that I've got. So that's one way that we do that. So a strategy for those working with young people who, you know, may struggle with a little bit of low self-esteem or self-image is to integrate these strengths into your conversations with them. So if you have a young person who is very down on themselves, is you know, struggling to feel happy or be motivated, you can call on past behaviors that you've seen them do. So for example, I remember when you got that assignment in on time and you felt really good about it. What helped you then? What strengths? You know, did you get yourself organized with a weekly planner? Did you seek help? So, you know, what strengths does that tell you that you've got? Or I was really impressed last time, you know, I seen you have an argument with your friend and you were able to resolve it. So really providing evidence for them that they do have some good strengths is a super, super important strategy of how you can help them to feel happier. So Cameron, do you have any examples of how you've used this tool specifically, like how deciding to be happy, so maybe making a tough decision that you knew was going to lead to some longer term happiness?
Definitely. I would look back to definitely the beginning of year 11 and all throughout year 12. It was a very difficult time and very hard for anyone my age. But the way I turned my viewpoint on it was just being more optimistic and confident and really trying to hammer that positive view for every little thing I saw. So if something went bad, it was just about trying to make myself, you know, feel good and think about the positive sides and the future. And overall, that had a really good effect on almost making it so you only remember you had a good time. It just makes you happier and more confident to face the challenges that come towards you.
Yeah, it's a huge thing that we see amongst young people, is that lack of confidence. And, you know, I don't know about people watching here today, but when I was a teenager, my dad used to say, don't get too big for your boots, or you've got a big head, if you know, you said you were proud of something. And I think young people still today feel like if they talk about their good qualities or their strengths or being too positive, people might try to knock them down. But actually, you can just do it internally, thinking about who you are as a person, what strengths you have, and that really helps you to be confident in who you are.
Great. Going back into the brain changes, I'm going to talk again about the prefrontal cortex. So again, we talk about that being the CEO and the last to fully mature. Another one of its key functions is thinking about the future and planning. And so if you think about the majority of the age groups that we work with would be about year 10. We do have programs and apprentices and workplace as well, but majority of what we're talking about is in year 10. And that's when there's a lot of pressure to think about what is going to be in the future for them, particularly around their career. And we know this is a challenge for them to think about internal goals for the future when that prefrontal cortex is still being developed. So one thing that we do in the program is to actually get young people to touch base with that limbic system, again, that emotional center of the brain, and really think about what they need in that sense to plan for the future. So what it might feel like to have that item in the future. So you can see on the screen there, we do something called a dream sheet, where we're getting them to think about other areas of their life, not just their career, and what that would be like for them. And I know, Ali, you're going to talk about some of our other tools, so I'm just stopping myself. So I'll just move on there.
Okay. I was just thinking then, sorry, Nina, about, I had a conversation at a school that I work in yesterday about year 10. So you were talking about, we do the program with year 10 students. And I actually did a presentation with some young people about year 10 to 11 transition. And the school leadership team there was saying how they recognize that year 10 is a very isolated year, that they recognize that the students struggle with connectedness within the school, but also outside as well, and how they're not quite senior years, which is, schools put a lot of emphasis on year 11 and 12, and they do a lot of things to support them, and obviously the lower years to help them to come up. And they recognize that year 10 is a very, very difficult year for whatever reason, whether it's brain development or that social thing. But I just was pondering then, as you were saying about us doing it with year 10 students, about how, across the board, they said year 10 is a really difficult year. So that might be good for some of you parents, or, other people working with young people to know that it's recognized. So during the program, like Nina said, we get students to plan out their future goals. So we use things like, Nina just said, they're a dream sheet, and we don't just focus on career, we focus on, what does that mean? If you get your dream career, what could you achieve? What lifestyle do you want? What people will be around you? And maybe who do you want to be? So what qualities and strengths do you want to show as a person? And we also do that via something called a visualization. So, one of the tools we use in the program, we get them to actually relax and lie down, and a lot of them think it's a bit weird at first, but they actually really love it by the end. And we get them to visualize what their life will look like in 10 years time. So you wake up to a great day in your future, you're feeling good, you feel proud of who you are and what you've achieved, and try to connect that goal to the emotion behind it. And that can really motivate them to plan for that. I think that's a really, in terms of a strategy for people working with young people, is to not only focus on what are you going to do as a career, focus on more who do you need to be, because that career idea might change, but if you can instill in them, it takes a certain type of person to be successful in, feeling happy and going after your goals and things like that, then, maybe that's what we need to focus on a little bit more. It's just something come up there in the chat bar. People still ask kids, so what do you want to do when you leave school? Unless you don't know, there's an area of disappointment. You're right. That's very true. And there's so much brain development going on at this age. It can be so difficult for a lot of young people. And I think that's probably why we focus as a program on who do you want to be, And
Cameron, I think you could probably comment on that as well. We were talking about that earlier, that there's so much pressure and it's okay not to know.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when asked the question, what do you want to be when you're growing up? It always instantly goes back to the career. Like, I know personally, I've always had a dead set goal of what I wanted to be when I was older in a career. But a lot of people, even finishing year 12, they have no clue. But as long as we're teaching them these skills to plan, they don't have to know what they want to work, but they can figure out who they want to be and really dive deep into their interests, because that's where they're going to find their career that's going to inspire them to be motivated and really enjoy the rest of their life.
Very good point.
Yeah, I love the idea of interests. We do that a bit in the program, that if people don't know, we look at their interests and what skills and attitudes they might need, even just to follow that. Because more than likely, the skills they develop for their interests is going to help them in their career once they figure it out. So it's a really good one. Yes. Okay, so on goal planning, we're going to also talk about another neurotransmitter changing, which is melatonin. And most people have already heard about this, or maybe you've even seen it on the shelf in the pharmacy because you can buy it as a over-the-counter tablet. So melatonin is responsible for our sleep-wake cycle. It makes us feel sleepy. When the sun goes down, we get an increase in melatonin and we can go to sleep. And then when the sun comes up, it kind of goes away. So one thing that we do know in adolescence, there's actually a reduction in melatonin and a delay in melatonin as well. And everyone's probably thinking, yes, young people like to go to bed late and they like to sleep in. And oftentimes school hours do not accommodate for this brain change. So young people are naturally becoming night owls. And it's pretty tricky. We're not sure why this has happened. Some scientists think it's an evolutionary advantage, like maybe if, thinking of the cave people days, as young people become adults, they need to kind of keep watch over the clan or something like that. But it could be a survival thing as well. The problem that we have in this day and age is we've got lots of exciting things like technology, that keep us awake. So even though that melatonin is delayed by just a couple of hours, it gets pushed out by other things like blue light technology and just a lot of the stress and pressure that we put on ourselves to be doing homework late in the night. So that kind of gets to be this big thing. And as you can hear from the rest of the presentation, the brain changes that are happening is a lot, all those synapses and the changes there. Young people need way more sleep than we actually recognize. So let's go into some strategies.
So before I did youth ops and really understood the need for sleep and how useful a sleep schedule was, I would stay up to ungodly hours of the night, wake up as soon as school starts, race through brushing my teeth and combing my hair, those sorts of things, and then just running out the door last minute. And then it was dreadful because I would get maybe 4 or 5 hours of sleep and then have to spend 6 hours studying and coming home. You're always grumpy. But after learning about how important these things are, every night I still find myself calculating, how many hours do I need tonight before tomorrow to make sure I've got those 8 hours at least in to just help me feel refreshed. With that, there are so many strategies. The first thing I would talk about is phones. Obviously, phones can have a very negative effect on sleep schedules, especially with the blue light that's emitted from artificial screens. A lot of devices these days do come with an artificial blue light remover. I know I myself have all of my laptops and phones hooked up so that the moment the sun goes down, the blue light stops showing. And it definitely helps me get to bed on a regular basis because I'm always on them. But some strategies for parents and mentors to use to help get the young people around them to go to sleep is all of these up on the screen. But I definitely think it comes in on how well you can get your kids to go to sleep. So obviously you're going to come home from work, you're going to be knackered, you're going to go make tea, you're going to hop on your phone, watch TV or something. And that can have quite a negative effect on the kids who grow up watching that, because they're going to come home from school and that's exactly what they're going to want to do. So if you can take the time to go for a short walk with them or read a book or, make sure they're having a shower twice a day, when they need to, those sorts of things can kind of implant the tools and the necessary habits that they need to help assist their sleep cycle. And not only would doing these things with them help them, but it will also help you. It's a benefit for everybody, but definitely putting in that extra bit of effort to try and plant those habits in can really assist them down the line and definitely give you a benefit as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Cameron. I know that's definitely, we were talking earlier about how, you know, when I have my downtime, I sit down, get my glass of wine, and I have a little scroll on my phone, and how, you know, you don't realize sometimes that the habits that you're in, your kids are watching that, or your teenagers watching that. Well, would you do it? You know, why isn't it okay for me to do it? But I guess it's about, you know, also recognizing when they do make good choices. That's positive reinforcement can go a really long way as well. And yeah, it's easier said than done, this one, but definitely worth putting in the effort, like Cameron said.
Okay, so let's just take a little breather for a moment and see if anyone has questions or comments so far. Is there anything that has resonated with you so far during the webinar, or any questions or on the content that has been delivered so far?
There's one that's come on there, Cameron, because I know you can't see that chat bar, but behavior is not deliberate but biological changes. And it's really true sometimes when we don't have that understanding, or even the patience to even try to understand it sometimes. With young people, it's easy to blame, but there is a lot of changes going on there.
We've got the goal setting is looking really good, and the brain change information is good so far.
I love it when people say they find it helpful. Thanks, Tina.
Yes, it's very good as we continue on. All right, we'll keep an eye out on the chat bar, but I will continue on again, going right back into those brain changes. Yay! So I know you've seen this image before, that difference between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. But not only is the limbic system hot-wired for emotion, as we were talking about earlier, but it's hot-wired for risk-taking. So, you know, that another key function of the prefrontal cortex is inhibiting inappropriate behaviors. That's a bit of a mouthful. And that limbic system there is more interested in immediate gratification. So it's also involved in the reward processing and is really hypersensitive to the rewards of risk-taking. Mm-hmm. So this means that young people are going to be seeking thrills, but, you know, maybe lacking the brakes to slow down. The prefrontal cortex is starting to catch up with the limbic system in this age. But, you know, we need to really question some of our immediate emotional responses and impulses in this time. So it's probably why, like, young people aren't allowed to get a tattoo till the age of 18, I think it is, because it's about really questioning some of those long-term strategies as well. So strategy for parents is already, just even knowing this information is about understanding how you can respond and get them to really think through with their prefrontal cortex. Again, it is developing, it's there, it's about getting us to help in getting them to practice it. So if you're a parent or a mentor, I know sometimes we can see the risk happening and we're like, don't do that because of this. And I've done that before and I know exactly what's going to happen. But as an adult, try your best to really respond by asking questions and getting the young person to use that prefrontal cortex. So asking them, what would the consequence be? If you can listen and speak to them in a really non-judgmental way and get them to think through it themselves. Cameron, I'm sure you have input on this because you know what it's like to be told certain things.
Yes, definitely. Teenagers, we take too many risks, but obviously some of them are good, some of them are bad. Some of the smaller risks that people take that might have a negative effect, they can still be quite constructive in the way that they're going to teach the young people in your life it's just going to teach them the lesson, you know. They might not do it next time, and going straight up to them and telling them that no, that was wrong, or if you go out, this bad thing's going to happen. It can sometimes have a negative effect, of course, if the risk is something really stupid, you should definitely rush in and stop them. But being told how things are going to go, and that your opinion, obviously, because you've already been through it, is right, can really set off teenagers. And it's more about trying to put it to them in a constructive way, and let them try and think their own thoughts that you've just kind of guided. So posing it to them as, so that went wrong, where can we, do better? Or is that really what you want to do? What sorts of things could go wrong? Because those thoughts they're going to have themselves are going to be a lot more personal and a lot more lasting in their minds, and will definitely help them process their emotions around the subject better than if you just kind of force the opinion onto them.
That's a really good point, Cameron. I'm sitting here questioning sometimes my own parenting, and it's so hard sometimes when you're a busy parent or you're at work and things like that, to kind of go, don't do that, you're going to get hurt, move on, instead of saying, taking the time to say, hey, if you make that choice, what's going to happen? Like, what do you think might happen, and what could be a better choice? So really good point.
Yeah, and this one is a bit of a double whammy as well, because not only is the brain structure really tricky in terms of that risk taking, but we also have this third neurotransmitter, dopamine, playing a big role. Dopamine is kind of known as the brain's pleasure neurotransmitter, so it plays a role in novelty and reward seeking as well. So this is particularly true for new experiences that are associated with risk or thrill and danger. Dopamine is incredibly powerful. It actually fluctuates quite a lot in adolescence. So I feel like young people are kind of chasing that a little bit more. So that's why you again see those risk-taking behaviors in that sense. It's a tricky one as well, especially as adults in these young people's lives, because it's hard to kind of predict whether a young person will kind of indulge in that risk-taking behavior. It will depend on a number of factors, such as, family support. We talked about that family member who can really question things and support the young person, and whether they have participation in other exciting tasks, which we'll talk about. But I also wanted to just make mention of dopamine and electronic use. So, we know that social media, if you get a notification on your phone, that's actually giving you a bit of a dopamine hit, which is why we have such a connection to our devices. And that's actually true for everyone. It's not just young people, right? We get that ding and we're like, oh, who loves me? Let's find out. It's very exciting. So again, that's such a powerful neurotransmitter that's why we find there's such a connection to social media as well.
So it's a very tricky time for that to happen, considering, a lot of young people struggle with their self-image and comparisons to other young people or to the perfect social media lives. And, every time they get that dopamine hit, they're also probably having a little bit of sense of, oh, I'm not good enough, which we know happens sometimes with social media. Okay, so Decide to Grow is recognizing that there is a need for young people to indulge in some risk taking. And the way that we do that in the program is to allow them to take healthy risk taking opportunities. So, it's not about jumping off that cliff. It's about saying, hey, does it feel really nervous to speak in front of people? Okay, well, how about you come up and help me in front of the class? Or, sometimes young people just struggle to answer a question. Putting your hand up to answer a question, that's a healthy risk-taking opportunity. So we really try to reframe it in a very positive way of that drive to get that dopamine hit, to get that feeling of adrenaline can be used in a really productive way at this age, in this stage of brain development. So helping them out by getting them into new sports, or just trying new things, speaking to new people, taking a drama class, like anything that's going to push them out of their comfort zone will give them that same hit as making a stupid decision down the beach with their friends. Risk taking is often seen as negative, but it can be really good at this age. Cam, we talked earlier about this. What are some of the ways that you made some healthy risk-taking choices on the program?
The program left me with a lot of opportunities to risk take, especially a lot to do with public speaking. So at the end of youth opportunities, everyone goes up and makes a speech, which was a very big moment for a lot of the people. And it was really fun and enjoyable, but still scary. It's still a very productive risk. Some others I had in Prosper Leadership was I worked on an interview panel for youth opportunities for them to hire new staff. I did a big presentation in front of the people who actually fund youth opportunities. I worked on some massive project planning that always felt like we were taking one step forward, two steps back, and it got harder and harder each time, but we still learned from those experiences and gained the tools necessary to stay confident and stay persistent.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I'm so glad that you got that opportunity to be part of Prosper Leaders, because it's not something that actually existed a couple of years ago. So we're very proud of that, and very proud that we can help those young people to do that healthy risk taking. Thank you. Nina, over to you.
It's a tricky balance as well. So I just wanted to add a little bit of a note on anxiety. I mean, even in Cameron, your example, it's like, you know, you can relate to the idea of being a bit scared when you try these new things. You can, yeah, great, getting the nods there. I think it's good to differentiate the idea between fear and anxiety. I think a lot of times we mix these things up. And also the fact that our bodies, ourselves are, you know, we can handle stress as humans. It's just that when it's ongoing, where it's a problem. Stress in short bursts can be good. It's that thing that motivates you to get up and do well in that thing. We can have that fear response in the moment. And then as long as we have that relaxation afterwards, or knowing that we've done well, that's what boosts our confidence in the end. So just to clarify, fear is that momentary feeling of being a bit scared, and, you know, like if you're public speaking and that kind of thing. Whereas anxiety is about worrying about something that's in the future. It could be in 5 minutes or it could be next week. But if you're focusing too much on that future and it's kind of an ongoing stressor, that's where it's a bit of an issue. So in the program, we have to really take on these challenges in a particular way. It's about pushing people in little steps that's going to maybe be a little bit scary in the moment, but lead to some really good outcomes. And we frame it to the young people in a sense of what's going to help your self-image. We talked about that before. What's going to make you feel better about yourself in the end? If actually after doing that thing is going to make you feel worse about yourself, that's probably not a good idea. And you may need to reframe and do something else. From a psychological point of view, it's actually called graded exposure therapy. Some of you might have heard that before. So again, that baby steps, a little bit of fear in the moment is okay, as long as it leads you to something good in the long term. So strategies for parents and mentors is finding those opportunities for safe risk taking. So all these things that we've been discussing, doing a leadership thing, going for a job, public speaking, ordering food, putting your hand up in class, whatever that means for that person. And it's also, you're just going to have to know when to gently push and when to kind of back off, because we don't want to make it too extreme for anyone. You're going to maybe give them chances to do something as a small step to something bigger and find that sweet spot.
Absolutely. I just jump in there very quickly, Nina, I've just been having a conversation on the chat bar there with Tina about graduations and how, you know, she's saying, oh, I hope my son can do that because he really struggles with it. And what I will say is, you know, so many of the young people that come onto the program struggle with this social anxiety and stepping outside of their comfort zone. And by the time they get to grad, we've allowed them to take so many small risks that, you know, they feel supported and they feel empowered. And there's not, I think maybe only 2 times in my whole 3 years of being here have we had to do like an alternative speech. So please know that if you are a parent of a student going through the program at the moment, you're thinking, oh my God, they're going to have to speak and they're not going to be able to do it. we, you know, say to them, this is a great opportunity, but, you know, in the moment, if you completely freak out and you can't do it, we'll do a question and answer session, or, you know, we'll read half of your speech each. We will support them to get to that point, and that is that kind of support and push, but not too much. Oh, somebody else, Acacia, my daughter graduated from the program on Monday and has always struggled with public speaking. She made a speech in front of about 80 people. That is amazing. Congratulations. Please tell her that. We're all very proud of her.
That's a good point, Ali. Thank you for that.
Sorry.
All right, going on to our last thing here, which is about the social brain in young people. Young people process social information differently. So the way that they understand and interact with other people is a work in progress. And I will say that actually, as humans, we are primed to read other people's emotions and react to them. And sometimes it's almost instant. I like to show this image here. Some of you might have seen this circling around, but, you know, in a sports environment where people are a bit removed from the person, you know, if you've got a goal that you've missed and it's like, no, the audience responds instantly and can really identify with that person, especially if they're emotionally invested in that team winning. You can even see in the image there that I think the only people that aren't responding the same as the player, I think, are on the other team, and they're on the wrong side of the auditorium there. So yes, with teenagers, the ability to take into account someone else's perspective is actually still developing. This has been demonstrated in a series of experiments where we get young people to they have to take into account someone else's perspective to solve a problem. Again, it's not a cognitive thing, it's about understanding other people's environments. So they're just a little bit less empathetic. And I think that's really important to know. So that as parents and mentors, it's about making sure that we're really clearly communicating what's going on, because what often happens is, as an adult in their lives, maybe you express concern about something, maybe it's that risk-taking behavior, but the young person actually interprets it as disappointment or anger, and then that kind of fires up that emotional response as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, taking that time to make that happen.
And talking about emotional responses, all humans have emotions, and it's really important for our young people and us to understand that there are no bad emotions. There is a spectrum, as you can see on this wheel here. There's hundreds of different emotions, but how we deal with them, on the other hand, can have a positive or negative effect on both ourselves and how we feel about how we handled it, and the people around us as well, so our relationships. So I don't know about you, but sometimes if life feels more busy, or I'm a bit stressed at work more than normal, I often don't take as much time to notice either mine or my family's actual emotions. And that, when I say actual emotions, I mean the feeling that lies beneath the bigger feeling that comes out of, so maybe they're feeling angry or they're feeling sad, because it just takes time and patience. And those are two things that, I don't know about you, but I feel like I don't have as much of when life's busy. And that usually results in tension, nitpicking, arguments in the family, or, even the workplace sometimes when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. And our teenagers have the same problem. If they don't make time to consider what they're actually feeling, they get stuck in that surface behavior, and then they can feel kind of riddled with guilt and shame, especially if their go-to emotion is anger. A lot of the young people that we work with feel bad for feeling angry. And it's really important to get them to understand the real feeling deeper down. And that can have not only a positive impact on their communication in the moment, so they may be able to just take a breath and actually explain, I feel angry, but actually I feel more disappointed in myself, or I feel jealous of this person at school who got an A, and I know I worked way harder than them. So trying to drill down into that real emotion behind that very surface level emotion can be super, super healthy for not only relationships, but also their own self-image. So the main benefit of actually naming their emotions is that it diffuses their charge and lessens the burden that they create, lessens the impact. And I mentioned Dr. Dan Siegel earlier on, and he has a phrase, and he says, you have to name it to tame it. If you can understand exactly what you're feeling, then you're able to express it better, and then able to have a conversation around it in a more understanding and maybe empathetic way as well. So, the emotional awareness helps us to know what we need and want, or even don't want, helps us build better relationships. And, just literally because we can actually talk about it more, resolve conflicts, help people to understand what we're actually feeling, rather than getting stuck in that top layer. So that's a really, if you just Googled emotion wheel, you can see there, all the different emotions, which is really important to understand. It's okay.
Alan. So that brings us to the end of our hour, and that we covered a lot of information in there. So I've just put a bunch of the strategies that we've discussed as we went on the screen there. I'm not going to read through them, but you can have a look, and each of you will receive a recording of this if you need to go back through and have a look at any of the slides. So other than that, I think we can.
Okay, so if you have enjoyed today, if you want to know more about youth opportunities, if maybe you don't already, please visit our website. There's a hyperlink on the slide there, or you can just type it into Google. We do have different programs and services, so please click on what we do and then all programs, because we not only run personal leadership programs through schools and our wraparound services, we've actually just launched a social enterprise called Generation Thrive, and that's where anybody can actually access the whole program online, as well as some online coaching with some qualified coaches. So it's an evidence-based program, and we're now able to offer it outside of the school gates, which we've been kind of tied into for the last 24 years. We're able to do more now, and on a bigger scale, and all proceeds from any sales of those programs do actually go back to us working with young people in those schools. So check it out if you want to know more. Cameron, over to you, I reckon.
Sure thing. So thank you all for taking the time to join us. We hope you found the webinar useful. If you could please take a moment to fill out the survey that is in the chat bar now, we would very much appreciate it.